Welcome back everyone. I'm pretty sure everyone knows by now that the iPhone 7 Plus was a phone that I think was probably loved more than not, but it did have a troubled past. And what a majority of people don't even know is that this phone just hit 4 years old, actually like a couple months ago, but we've been bombarded with so much new technology that we didn't even get a chance to talk about these older phones that I love talking about. So the iPhone 7 Plus came out in 2016, and I've already made 3 videos, full reviews of it this year, the early review, mid review, and just the late review. But now I want to kind of just celebrate the history of this device and see how it held up then, back, I guess even earlier this year, and even now where it stands as of right now as a 4-year-old iPhone and potentially the oldest iPhone that could be supported for the next version of iOS. But when this thing first came out back in 2016, this was a phone that had a really weird rollout because Apple, this was the first iPhone to remove the headphone jack. And at that time, I think people hated it. And even me, I used an iPhone 6 Plus at the time, and I could not even imagine using a phone without a headphone jack. And I think that was this phone's biggest problem at the time, was just the headphone jack issue. But then a couple years later, I think it was like 2017 at some point, I ended up picking up the iPhone 6s Plus, and I had a great time with it. And I thought the same thing. I could never use a phone that doesn't have a headphone jack. Whereas on the 7 Plus, it was doing really decent numbers. There were some issues early on, but they ended up getting fixed for the most part. And the AirPods started taking off too. And that's something that people don't realize. With the success of the 7 Plus, or more so, I guess, the lack of headphone jack for those phones, people ended up picking up those AirPods, and now AirPods are like a staple in just the culture overall when it comes down to even beyond technology, just in just the culture of everyone. AirPods are just everywhere, which is awesome. And, we can thank some of that success to the rollout of the 7 Plus. And then eventually I picked up the iPhone 7 Plus, I think late 2017 or early 2018. You can watch back my videos then and I start talking about it. But I had a really good time with that 7 Plus. And I think it was probably one of my best iPhones I ever owned. I eventually switched over to an iPhone 10. And even then I had a hard time, giving up my iPhone 7 Plus because I missed that home button, which was so weird. I never thought I would say that, but I just felt like the iPhone 10 was overpriced at that time, and that 7 Plus, getting those software updates at the time and kind of, comparing it to the iPhone 10 at the time, it just felt like the 7 Plus was a no-brainer in some cases. And this was also the first time we saw a dual camera setup on those iPhones too. And now every phone has like a dual camera setup except the iPhone SE2. But these phones, the 7 Plus and the 7 included, but these phones, but the 7 Plus more so, just held up so well throughout the test of time. And eventually with the rollout of iOS 13 and iOS 14, I stopped using the 7 Plus, I think around when the iPhone 10 was about a year old, when that one eventually got, iOS 12 or I think around the iOS 12 beta time, that's when I switched over to the iPhone 10. I could be totally wrong. But the iPhone 7 Plus was the last home button iPhone that I owned in terms of a daily phone that I used. And I had a great time with it, a great experience. And even now when I look at it and I just compared it to the 12 Pro Max and all these other phones, I'm still pleasantly surprised by how well the iPhone 7 Plus is holding up. And this is going to be another case where I think when iOS is done getting supported for these phones, so when iOS 15 comes out and then we eventually get, the next versions of iOS and stuff, and the iPhone 7 Plus stops getting supported, I'm going to think to myself that this is going to be another set of phones that could have probably handled the next version of iOS. The iPhone 6s and 6s Plus are kind of in that time frame as well, but because of the rumors and everything that are coming out, the iPhone 7 Plus is set to actually get iOS 15. So if that's true, this 4-year mark could potentially be like a 5 or 6-year mark depending on when the security updates are done for the 7 Plus. So this phone could still be relevant even 2 years later, maybe at least like a year, but maybe even 2 years later than now, which would be insane. The time frame of this phone is awesome. This phone's performance is still pretty good. The battery size is actually pretty decent, and it's bigger than the iPhone 12 Pro's battery size, which is insane to me. This phone that, came out in 2016 still has a bigger size battery at its native full 100% charge than the brand new $1,000 phone from Apple. So even just in terms of that, when you look at the evolution that Apple did 4 years ago and now, yes, a lot of other things have changed, and I would rather have a 12 Pro than even 3 iPhone 7 Pluses, but that's still a really big deal, that the 7 Plus had that big of a size battery at that time than the iPhone 12 Pro, which is very weird. And when you look at the phone and you look at the edges and you just feel how this phone felt, and you look specifically at that jet black version of the iPhone 7 Plus, that was my favorite version of any iPhone that ever came out. That was the cleanest version of phone that ever came out, I think, from Apple. And I really hope they make another phone like that. But in terms of the iPhone 7 Plus and how it holds up a whole 4 years later, what I can tell you is this phone brought a lot to the table. It brought the dual camera setup, the removal of the headphone jack, which I think is kind of funny to even mention, but it brought a lot of firsts, it brought that dual camera setup, which I really did like. And that telephoto lens has been circulated over and over and over again, eventually switched over to that ultra wide sensor that's now like on the base models of all iPhones. But I think when you look at this phone, and even we look back, 4 or 5 years from now, we'll probably say the same thing, that the 7 Plus really showed a shift just beyond iPhones, because the AirPod release came out the same time, the dual camera setup came, and the removal of the headphone jack came, and for better or for worse, it did end up changing Apple and ended up making them a lot of money in the long run. So that really pretty much covers it up for the most part. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well, my Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly, everything else. I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.